Today I'm out near San Antonio, Texas, taking a look at one of the worst kept secrets in the automotive industry. It's the all-new Toyota Tundra, and this is the most interesting model. This is the new upcoming hybrid system. This takes the Tundra from 389 horsepower, where we find the base version, up to 437 horsepower and a whopping 583 pound-feet of torque. But what was the secret was exactly how the hybrid system works and how it's designed. That's what I'm going to go into in this video, and all the hybrid-specific things that you need to know about before waiting for the new Tundra, because the hybrid model is going to come a few months after the regular twin-turbo. On the outside, you can tell the hybrid from the non-hybrid due to the blue badging right there on the Toyota logo and this big iForce Max badge right here on the hood, because iForce Max is what Toyota is calling their new hybrid system. If you want to get the hybrid system, it is going to be available in Limited, Platinum, $1,794, and then it becomes standard in TRD Pro. It's optional in the other trims. It's going to be found only in the big cab version, Crew Max, and that's because the battery is actually located inside the cabin. It's a nickel metal hydride battery pack underneath the rear seats. It's not mounted in some other frame location. Now behind here, we have a 6.5-foot bed in this model. You'll get a 5.5-foot bed if you choose the TRD Pro, and the rest of the trims you can choose between 5.5 and 6.5-foot beds. Other than the badging up front, everything else about the Tundra is identical to the regular turbo version. We get a single exhaust tip over here on the driver's side, and no hybrid logos back here on the tailgate. Now let's talk about what makes the hybrid system tick. The first thing to know is that all Tundra models for 2022, whether we're talking about the hybrid or the non-hybrid, use a 3.5-liter twin-turbo V6 engine. Fortunately, Toyota has brought along a cutaway, so let's take a deep dive into the system. Right here we have the heart of everything, which is a 3.5-liter twin-turbo V6 engine producing 389 horsepower, 437 pound-feet of torque. There's a liquid-to-air intercooler on the top, which is really an interesting touch, and the radiators for that intercooler are over here on either side of the front end of the vehicle. This vehicle has some color-coded parts. Let's talk about that now. The orange parts are all the ones that relate to the hybrid system. So we have the addition of this small extra radiator right here on top. These teal components here relate to the turbo system. So these are the intercoolers for the turbo that go with the teal section right there on top of the engine. We then have the high voltage inverter assembly over here on the passenger side of the engine bay. The motor is located right there in this orange section. The key thing about this system is that we have a traditional 10-speed automatic transmission behind the engine. So traditional 10-speed automatic, pancake electric motor, clutch pack, then 3.5-liter twin-turbo V6. This does not use a separate motor generator unit on the front like we see in Hyundai and Kia hybrids. Instead, on the driver's side of things, this orange cable goes to an electric air conditioning compressor, not a separate starter motor. It does use a traditional starter motor to start the engine for the very first time. Outside of that, it's going to be slipping the clutch pack right over here and then using this electric motor to start the engine while doing sort of a dance with the drivetrain behind. This electric motor is rated for 48 horsepower and 184 pound-feet of torque. It's powered by this nickel metal hydride battery pack right back here in orange. This lives just under the rear seats, but inside the cabin. It's not under the vehicle in a frame element like we find in the F-150 hybrid. The battery is rated for 1.87 kilowatt hours. That is a little bit smaller than the one that we find in the F-150 hybrid, mainly because of the battery chemistry. And keep in mind, this battery is used differently. This is an air-cooled nickel metal hydride battery, so it's not going to be able to dissipate quite as much power quite as frequently as the lithium-ion liquid-cooled pack that we find in the F-150. So the vehicle is going to use the battery in a different way. The pancake electric motor and the 3.5-liter twin-turbo V6 combine to give us 437 horsepower, 583 pound-feet of torque. But it's important to remember that the mission of this hybrid system is quite different than the hybrid system that we find in, say, the Lexus LS or the Lexus LC. They also use a 3.5-liter twin-turbo 6-cylinder engine and a hybrid powertrain behind, but that hybrid powertrain has a very different design than this. This is a traditional 10-speed automatic transmission. This is a regular old 2-speed transfer case. This orange section is where the pancake electric motor and the clutch pack lives. This is a very different design than we find in the Lexus LS. The LS hybrid combines a planetary power split system with a 4-speed automatic transmission behind, but it's not designed with the same kind of towing, hauling, and payload abilities that you'll find in the Toyota Tundra. And that's why this hybrid system actually has a design that is shockingly similar to the F-150s. As far as the concept of operation goes, obviously the implementation is unique to each vehicle. The one key piece of information that has yet to be released about the new Tundra Hybrid is fuel economy. The non-hybrid Tundra will get 19 or 20 miles per gallon combined with basically the same 3.5-liter V6 engine under the hood. This model I expect to probably be somewhere around 22 to 24 miles per gallon depending on the version that you get. I know some people will be disappointed by that fuel economy estimate, but take a look at the rest of the design of the truck. When you take a look at hybrid vehicles with really high fuel economy numbers, they've done more than simply add a hybrid system to the Tundra. And because Toyota was interested in payload ability, in towing ability, off-road ability, etc., they have retained all of the structure that we find in the regular Tundra model. We have basically the same frame here, same rear axles, the same 10-speed automatic transmission, same 2-speed transfer cases, etc., and essentially the same 3.5-liter twin-turbo V6 engine. And the engine is part of the equation here, because rather than moving to an Atkinson cycle engine like we find in really every other Toyota hybrid out there, this engine operates on the same cycle. So if you're worried about the battery pack losing charge and then not having as much oomph to climb that hill or pull that trailer or get you off-road, this has the exact same kind of oomph that we find in the regular non-hybrid model, even when the battery pack is exhausted. So still 437 pound-feet of torque going out of the engine into the transmission, even when the battery is exhausted. As you might expect, the additional weight of the hybrid system in the Tundra is going to affect payload and towing. Theoretically, there's a version of the Tundra that will tow up to 12,000 pounds and a version that will give you nearly 2,000 pounds of payload ability. Now keep in mind, payload does include the driver. If you get the hybrid version, then payload is going to drop between 500 and 600 pounds, depending on the trim level that you get, and the tow ratings could drop by as much as 700 pounds. The tow rating is really not affected very much because in a lot of states in the US, you need a Class A of some description in order to tow more than 10,000 pounds conventional. So honestly, 11,500 pounds of towing ability in a hybrid Tundra is good enough for just about everybody. On the inside, there's really no differentiation between the hybrid and the non-hybrid model. Right now I'm inside a 1794 trim, so we have walnut dashboard components right there, and the 1794 logo, stitched goods on the dashboard. Things look definitely very attractive there, and this big 14-inch touchscreen infotainment system, dual zone climate control, ventilated and heated seats. Over here we have some of the towing assistant features. We have the air suspension for the rear. This is just a rear air suspension, not a four-corner air suspension. Integrated trailer brake controller right over there. Same shifter that we find in the regular models, and drive modes over here become a little bit different. And you'll see them if I move over here to the LCD instrument cluster. The only real difference between the hybrid and non-hybrid limited is that the hybrid gets this large LCD cluster and the non-hybrid gets a 4-inch LCD cluster. Here we have a few different drive modes, including Comfort and Eco, because this does have the adaptive suspension in addition to the rear air suspension. If I click over here to Custom, I can then move over to the infotainment system and adjust that custom drive mode for powertrain, suspension, and steering settings. The only major change on the interior is that we don't have a storage area underneath the rear seats. That's because this is where the 12-volt battery and the nickel metal hydride battery pack is located. It's an air-cooled battery right over here. There is a little filter element on that little door on the driver's side. And in case you're wondering, that's where the 12-volt battery is located. Now let's get the Tundra Hybrid out on the road. Although, interestingly, Toyota is not calling this a Tundra Hybrid. They prefer to call it the iForce Max because this is the most powerful version of the Tundra. And in their mind, this hybrid system has a different mission than previous generation Toyota hybrid systems. This has a very different design than every other Toyota hybrid system marketed around the world. This hybrid system, again, has a design very similar to what we find in the F-150. This hybrid system is designed with towing, hauling, and off-roading in mind. Even when you have no more power available from the battery pack in the rear, we still have nearly 390 horsepower available thanks to the twin-turbo V6 engine, and a robust 10-speed automatic transmission. So for the large part, this feels just like the regular Tundra. If I floor it, we have gear shifts. The gear shifts are very predictable. If I put this over into the sport mode and start shifting down, it feels exactly like the regular twin-turbo Tundra. But then when you floor it, you get the extra boost from the electric motor. Now on the downside, fuel economy is likely not going to be as high as some people may have hoped for. This hybrid system is likely going to be getting very similar fuel economy to the Ford F-150 hybrid. If we take a look at the twin-turbo 6-cylinder version of the Tundra, it actually falls a little bit behind the 3.5-liter twin-turbo F-150. I expect this to come in between 23 and 24 miles per gallon combined, once EPA numbers are available, which rather unfortunately, they are not at the moment. But this system will get you 0 to 60 faster than the regular model, and it helps solve some of the turbo lag that you'll get in the regular model with auto start-stop. So for instance, if I come to a complete stop here, or just a slowdown when the engine's off and I floor it, we get a little bit of torque there from the electric motor, then the gasoline engine kicks on, the turbos come up to speed, and we get 0 to 60 in around 7.2 seconds. That should be a little bit faster than the regular turbo version. You'll notice I'm talking a lot about the F-150 hybrid in this video, and that's because, in my opinion, without comparisons, reviews are meaningless, and the F-150 hybrid is the only other hybrid half-ton in America. Versus the F-150 hybrid, this vehicle seems a little bit less aggressive at turning the engine off when you're slowing down, but if you're driving it very gently, it will turn the engine off even at highway speeds. I was pleasantly surprised to find that transitions between electric mode, hybrid mode, and EV mode are definitely smoother than in the F-150, even though the logical design of this drivetrain is very, very similar. This 10-speed automatic transmission also has a really nice feel to it. It doesn't seem quite as quick shifting as the Ford transmission, but the shifts are a little bit smoother and a little bit better polished. In a lower speed limit area, like the residential road that I'm on here, you'll notice that you can cruise along in electric-only operation as long as the road's pretty level and you keep your foot really light on the throttle. Any sort of incline, like the incline that we're going to come up to here, will definitely require that the engine kick on. You'll also notice that regenerative braking is not as aggressive in this vehicle as it is in any other Toyota hybrid. And that's due to the size of the electric motor and the way the electric motor is used in the drivetrain. If you're, say, at highway speeds and you're coming to a stop, remember that the power has to flow through the 10-speed automatic transmission to get to the electric motor. So as you're slowing down in those situations, you will feel the automatic transmission shift down. During my short time driving this hybrid system, I noticed that it is pretty easy to completely deplete the battery pack. However, because we get a pretty powerful twin-turbo V6, it's actually hard to tell exactly when that has happened, because the nature of the vehicle doesn't really change too much whether the battery is full or whether it's not. We get the expanded start-stop ability, the electric air conditioning compressor in the hybrid model, and the ability for that low-speed crawl situation in electric-only mode with the addition of that extra oomph. But in a vehicle this size, the difference between 389 horsepower and 437 horsepower is actually pretty difficult to divine. When it comes to handling, ride quality, and cabin noise, this is essentially the same as the rest of the Tundra lineup in the US, which is to say vastly improved over the previous generation. And a lot of that has to do with the new suspension design in the rear. This has coil springs in the back rather than leaf springs. That's something that we first saw in the Ram 1500. It also has an adaptive suspension system available. This model has that particular option, and load leveling rear airbags. The air suspension in this vehicle is a little bit different than the one in the Ram 1500 because this is not a four-corner air suspension. Just the rear has the airbags, and they provide load leveling ability so that way the rear springs don't have to be as firm as they would otherwise have to be. If you put more weight in the back and the rear starts to sag, it simply pumps up the airbags to help support the load, and that gives you much better handling ability and much better ride quality. On top of that, this model has the available adaptive dampers, and this definitely gives you a much more compliant ride than something like the GMC Sierra, or the Chevy Colorado, or the F-150. Last but not least, let's talk about what everybody is wondering: what's the fuel economy in the new Tundra Hybrid? Keep in mind, this hybrid system wasn't designed specifically for class-leading fuel economy, and that is important to keep in mind. Instead, Toyota designed the system again for towing, for hauling, for off-roading, etc., and they designed this to be the most powerful version of the Tundra. That's why this has a hybrid system that has a very different design to every other Toyota and Lexus hybrid system that we've seen before. Now, the downside to that is fuel economy. Very much as we see in the F-150 hybrid, fuel economy is not 30 mpg, where some people were hoping. Over the short amount of time that I've been behind the wheel of this hybrid, I've averaged 23 mpg. I was able to speak to the person that drove it out here from San Antonio. It's about 80 miles. They averaged about 24 mpg. But over the day of driving, where all the journalists out here have been driving this, according to the Trip fuel economy meter, it's averaged 14.5 mpg. Keep in mind, this hybrid system is probably going to come in somewhere between 22 and 24 mpg combined, depending on whether you get the two-wheel drive model or the four-wheel drive model. This is the four-wheel drive model, so I suspect this one is probably going to end up right around 22 mpg combined. I'll reserve final judgment on Toyota's iForce Max hybrid system for when I finally get some pricing information, because the one big thing that I don't know is how much it's going to add to the cost of your Tundra. Although we do know that it's going to be, again, optional on Limited, Platinum, $1,794, and it's going to be standard on the TRD Pro version. And the reason Toyota made it standard on that model is because of the additional oomph that the system provides, which definitely is going to give you a bit more grunt in off-roading situations. Now, the one thing that you should keep in mind is right back here in the cargo area. We have a 120-volt inverter port, but unlike Ford's hybrid system, we get a lot less power out of it. And that honestly surprised me, because you will find a more powerful AC inverter in something like a Toyota minivan. In here, this is going to deliver just 400 watts of 120-volt AC. That is considerably less than the 2,400 watts that we find standard in the Ford hybrid system, or the 7.2 kilowatts that we find optional in that Ford hybrid. So Toyota is definitely going after a different shopper with the hybrid Tundra than Ford is with their hybrid F-150. Now, the Tundra's hybrid system is definitely smoother than the one that we find in the Ford. That shouldn't surprise anybody, because Toyota has been at the hybrid game longer than pretty much everybody else. But this is, again, a completely different hybrid system than Toyota has ever used before. So I have to say I'm very impressed with the performance of this particular system. The combination of the 10-speed automatic means this is going to be just as rugged, just as dependable and capable as the regular Tundra with the 10-speed, but you will get a very modest bump in fuel economy. And likely more important for most Tundra shoppers, you'll get the extra oomph provided by the electric motor and the ability to save a little bit of gas in stop and go and slow and go traffic. Be sure to let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section below. And if you want to know everything else about the Tundra, what it's like on the inside, what the seats are like, what the dashboard is like, etc., be sure and check out my full video on the regular twin turbo version of the Tundra. That should be debuting just about the time that you're watching this video. And if you want to get your hands on a hybrid Tundra, then you are going to have to wait until calendar year 2022, because the regular twin turbo model is going to go on sale first. Then it's going to be followed up by this optional hybrid system. So be sure and sound off down there in the comment section below and let me know, do you think Toyota should put a bigger inverter on the Tundra, or do you think that's not a huge feature for you? I, again, am surprised that the one that we find in the Toyota Sienna Hybrid is more powerful than the one that we find in this model, but it may have something to do with the battery pack. This does use a nickel metal hydride battery pack. It's located inside the vehicle. It appears to be air-cooled, and that's a little bit different than the battery that we find in the F-150 Hybrid. It's possible that due to the different battery chemistry that we find in this hybrid versus the F-150 Hybrid, that they just can't be quite as aggressive with inverter outputs. Certainly, the battery is pretty impressive in the F-150 Hybrid, being able to put out 7,200 watts really constantly. It can do that for days and days at a time. That is not exactly what we see in this hybrid. As always, be sure and hit that subscribe button down there at the bottom of your screen. Find me over at facebook.com, Instagram, all those other social places, and of course, check out the merch store at aoamerch.com. I'll see all of you later.